Okay. Hello, Ron, and welcome to the second episode of our podcast, VAHVA Podcast. Today we want to talk about movement training. We want to actually give you a very broad, a perspective on it. We want to talk about the history, the origin of it, the kind of how has the sort of modern, or where does the modern movement training sort of come from, and also the thing that I think is sometimes a little bit hard to do, try to define, give you some sort of definition of movement training, basically. And I think we could actually start from this, because otherwise, you don't really even know what we kind of talking about. And for me, it was kind of, I started to think about it as a way of having these sort of three ways to categorize. First of all, we have our own kind of movement training, what we call movement training, and the way we practice it. And I think that we have maybe a little bit a unique features on it, to specifically how we do it. And then we have the second also way to define it, which is kind of watching at other people, how they do when they say they're doing movement training or they're part of the movement culture. You can look at how these people train, and then you can kind of derive sort of a definition from there, just looking at how people do it. And then I think there's sort of the third way as well, which is the ideal of movement. And this is kind of what people would like it to be, kind of this sort of perfect, all-encompassing system, which I think that in practice it never really is. But I think for us it's maybe the better start from the way we see it and the way we usually use the concept movement training and how we understand it, basically. And I think for us it's maybe it's the most clearest to actually start from the purpose or the goals that we have regarding movement training, because this kind of separates. You can do all sort of the mechanical exercise or mechanical movements, but what is the bigger purpose behind those movements? And for us, I think that the movement training, the goal and the purpose of it, usually it's something more general, and it's kind of open, and you can understand this if you think about the other form of training, where you have a very specific goal. Maybe you're training the mobility of your hamstrings, or you're training the hypertrophy for your bicep, or you have a very specific goal. You want to train some sort of speed or something like this. But I think at least in our movement training, it's more open, and you get a lot of benefits from it, but it's that very strictly defined.
Yeah, for us it's more like using the whole body to do different movements, that moving holistically and in harmony with the whole body. And it's not like a typical exercise where you do push-ups or isolate the biceps or something like that, but it's more like just using the whole body in harmony and synchrony.
Yeah, exactly. So you have, it's a different purpose, but also the movements are different. Like Samuel said, something where you're using everything kind of, we call it this sort of natural way to move the body in a way which is more instinctive. It's not super conscious. You don't put too much thought into the form of it. You don't think that I need to put my arm exactly there, or my back needs to be in this position, like you sometimes do. People do some monkey walks, they try to hold on to some posture, but for us it's much more free, I think. Yeah,
and that's where the benefits come from, because the movement training is excellent for making the body limper, dynamic, elastic, because you are not holding on to any strict patterns or rigid postures. Instead, you just moving the body naturally and in different scenarios, basically.
So we could kind of say maybe that it's, in very simple terms, the purpose is to just learn to move your body. I guess this.
Yes, and the benefits come from the moving the body, with maybe let's say bicep curl or push up. There are very certain things you want out of the exercise. With the push up, you really want to develop the chest and triceps and shoulders, and that's the primary purpose. But with movement training, you want to develop different areas, but it's more like a side product. The first purpose is to move.
Yeah, exactly. If you do a bear walk or a lizard crawl, at least when I do it, I don't really think about, well, now I'm training my chest, or Now I'm, trying to train my obliques, but it happens as a result, so sort of natural result. Like this is the idea of like going back to something that sort of like we say, like going back to roots. People used to move around all the time, back in the days, and they were built. Their bodies were somewhat developed, and it came through just like moving around. And I think sometimes it's easy to think of as like obvious. Some of these patterns of movement that we teach that are quite simple, but actually people have lost this sort of natural movement capability completely. Like even the most basic forms of like monkey movements or bear or crab walks, they are actually noticed so many times how hard and difficult it is for people to actually do, and it's actually surprises me even like this day, but this is really the case.
Yeah, and the movement patterns, they're like part of your evolution. That's how like little babies, like when they crawl and then they do the walks and so on, like that's how they naturally move. And many like these like animal movements are actually like trying to like kind of mimic how like the babies used to move when they were.
I think it's funny because we were in Shanghai just recently, and we saw a kid there like doing exactly like the sort of monkey hops that we've been doing in training, and some like jumping around on the street. And I thought that was like super fun to see. Like it's just like because it was like the exact movement that we actually use like in training, and so kids, certainly use this, and they're kind of like developmental, I don't know, like fundamental movement patterns and like evolving when you grow up, And so talking about like this sort of developmental steps, or where does it like come from, this sort of philosophy of like that it's useful to do these natural movements. I think it's maybe good to talk about like where does it really come from? Because of course the term movement training or something, it hasn't like really been there, but there's still been a lot of like moving and training around that right now is part of what we call movement training, or what some people call movement culture. And we can start from maybe like some prehistoric eras. Even we can go to like the Paleolithic eras and talk about the hunter and gatherers, and where kind of some of it, but again, it wasn't training. This was just like their natural life. But this is kind of what we're in some ways trying to replicate, and where it comes from. This emphasis on these natural movements comes from there, that because we think that okay, this is something very fundamental for humans, because we developed with doing these movements, so it's important for us, for our physical development and also mental development.
Yeah, because if we go outside the humans, if we look at animals, like they don't do any exercise, and they are like naturally super strong. Most of them are quite healthy, and they're also limper and dynamic and so on, and they haven't done any exercise, and they just naturally have grown like.
Yeah, I think one thing is though that I always think like it's a little bit hard to say exactly like what kind of shape the cavemans were. Like I bet they were strong and all that, but like in general, how healthy were they and so on. Like they probably had their share of injuries, and well, who knows, in the end. But anyway, like it is something that definitely has benefits. Like even if you don't have to watch the caveman era, you can just notice those benefits by doing the movement training by yourself, and then seeing like okay, you feel a little bit better, you're a little bit stronger, you have more energy, and just less pains and tightnesses because you move around. This is
Yeah, like just moving the body is the secret of the animals. Like they just move and everything takes care of itself. Yeah. But the problem with like humans today is that we have like so distanced ourselves from the natural way to move and the natural way to live. So, and that's the reason why we actually need movement training, because we are not day to day moving as we probably maybe should, and that's why we also need like exercise and all kinds of stuff, because our like modern lifestyle is creating the problems and is causing all the like the tightness in the body and
like
so
you say maybe that the balance is not there, because even when people do exercises, I think still the most popular form of exercise is just like, it's only like the single joint or bench press or something that you do on the machines or using the weights like this. I think it's good form of exercise, but I think it's a little bit imbalance of how we're training.
And it's very like one-dimensional
Yes.
way as well, because like the true movement, if you look at like any cat animals or so on, cat animals, they move like waves, and they're very fluid and very limper. And if you like always do just bench press and very one-dimensional simple patterns, you are not going to develop the very natural way to move the body.
No.
Because like the body can move in so many different ways. Like maybe dancers are the only ones who kind of have the similar thing with their movement patterns.
Like dancers
and athletes, and like they can move in so many different ways. They can twist and bend in like
I actually think like in many sports that's true. Like athletes actually do what you could say movement, because they do natural things like run, they walk, they jog, they jump. I don't know, they do all this, throw in many sports as well. So that's a good point. I think they actually have. And I guess maybe, okay, so this was this sort of history, really like historic thing, but going back to like where it actually became this like a form of exercise, like a training method actually. I think we can maybe go like already like to the early 20th century. I think there was many guys who were kind of like pioneers already in what we today call like movement training. I think at least like we, for example, we were really fond of like the old school strongman training, and surprisingly they were actually super versatile in their approach to training, like incredible. You would be really surprised, and we were really into that type of training, for example in our early 20s.
Like back in the days, the guys, they would try almost anything. Like they would just pick the weight and try almost any exercise you can imagine, and not all of them looked very like safe, but they had the courage and the creativity to try a lot of different things to find out what works and what doesn't, and so on. And that what made them as well very like comprehensive in terms of their physical ability.
I think that was one of the keys you said, like creativity. Like that's maybe what's a little bit missing, because like for me, for example, when I did training, it was so like I wanted to test out these different things and do and try, and now it's like you have this set of like 5 exercises in your mind that you're like, this is what I'll just do. There's no searching at all. Like you're not really doing any sort of exploration. And this maybe forgot to like mention in the start that we always emphasize in our movement training also that it is like a sort of exploration always, every time you do it at the same time.
And when you look at kids, they try to like explore everything, like the body and the environment and so on. But when we grow up, we just like we forget everything. Like we stop exploring the body, although the body is changing all the time, and we stop like just studying the body
and exploring the environment as well. Like I was at least like in the forest running, or there was like a tree, you climbed the tree, and if I had like, I remember we had like the stairs at a home. And I was doing like some sort of like a bear walk like down the stairs, and sort of like a lizard type of movement also, and like this sort of stuff that you do as a kid is just, I don't know, it just stop doing, of course. Maybe you think it looks silly, but
like the kids, they try everything. Like they do like blah 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 blah, blah with the mouth and so on. Like they try like every little thing they can do with their hands and so on. But I don't know what happens, like we just, like I think our minds get rigid and we just stop, I don't know what happens. We just get rigid inside out, and then the body also gets very stiff, and we are just no longer like interested in how our body moves, although the body changes every year. Like I have a very different body now than I did maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And that's why like I need to study it. Like I need to see how it moves, because it changes every year. especially when I'm training and moving the body. Like I have a different body now than I did 5 years ago.
It's super fascinating, fascinating process, and I think the reason is probably just the education. You know, we are sort of like we grow up into this like a rules and sets of what is good and what is right and what is the way to behave. So I guess this is kind of the thing. We just learn to act in a certain way, and maybe this way. But the movement training, then the origins and the development of it.
Yeah, in addition, like there were like many strong guys like the John Grimek, who was like a bodybuilder but also like a strong man, and he was also good at gymnastics and
was able to do splits, handstand push-ups, strongman moves.
And he tried to do like everything physical, like he was training with all kinds of tools and moving the body in all kinds of ways. And I think and before that there were a couple of guys.
I mean, at least one that I was always surprised was the guy like the Max Sick, who was, well, actually not sure like if he was really on the movement. He was maybe a little bit. I just know that he had a super deep approach, like in the muscle control of his body, which I think is also like part of it, and just doing also like these gymnastic moves and weightlifting and all sort of stuff. But like there was so many, I think, just old school bodybuilders who were like really knowledgeable about training and just had this sort of elements of combining different things, like because movement training today is like combining these different things, and these guys were already doing it, but there's kind of, they're buried under, I don't know, just buried under the years. They're never really brought up. And I just like read about this one guy called George Herbert, who also was like in the early 20th century, who had like this very like clearly defined, it was called like, I think it was natural method. And this guy basically had like this, in this method, he had this sort of, from all these different categories of running, jumping, I think there was like maybe climbing, swimming, throwing, but he had all these different categories of the sort of natural, primal, functional movements, you could say. And his training consisted of these, like you would do these exercises or from all these categories. Like this was like very like familiar sound for me, like combining these things. And this was like in the early 20th century, and it's very surprising to actually me to find out that this was this kind of so early already, this sort of physical evolution.
Yeah, and actually if you look at the early 20th century, like not just like the physical culture, but also like the medicine and so on, like how to treat the body and how to eat healthy and so on. It was actually very high level and very natural paced. But something, I don't know what, but maybe after 1920 or 1930, when the drugs and all that's like the technology started to come out, like it's just everything became like, I don't know, it's just we got lost from the natural way of things, and we just started to do like, everyone started to do like bodybuilding and typical exercise, and then like using drugs and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe it was back then, it was just like easier to commercialize, or maybe it just was like you said, like the general philosophy, like on every sector changed, not just the training, but the whole the medical industry and the training industry, and everything started to go to the direction of more mechanical movement.
Yeah, more commercial as well. Commercial, like everything started to become commercial, like in the 1950s and after that. Like before that, it wasn't like so. It wasn't about money so much and profits. So that's the thing. And I think like between like, of course, good stuff came out between like the early 1900s and 2000s, but I think in some ways we got really sidetracked and lost. And I think now in the early 2000s we're like like returning back to the like the natural way.
That's a good point, because we're actually making the return, because like even this, like we are now bringing out these guys from the early 20th century. So it's sort of like now that we're like digging up these guys and digging up these ways that were a little bit forgotten, and it's like a big, I don't know, cultural shift in training that's been going on already for I think quite many years. And yeah, I was thinking about like the evolution there. You know, maybe we go already to the early 2000s then, or well, a little bit before that. There was already like, of course, stuff that we start to see, like the Gymnastica Natural guys who did like BJJ movements and.
Yeah, it seems like after 90s, it's like it started to come back, because even like martial arts, like between like 19 and 2000, there were like most martial arts were really changed from the original form to the modern form, and also the original essence was lost as well. Like most like modern martial arts became sports and unpractical and not even like good martial arts actually.
Yeah.
But now it's also like after UFC and the early 90s, and like everything is coming back. But for almost 100 years, like it seems like everything got lost, and now we're coming back.
Yeah, I think almost like skipped sort of the martial arts completely, because that's like, if you look at like the movement training, you know, the movements and all these animal movements, like martial arts is also like that is a huge origin for like those different sort of like lizard walks and the monkey walks and whatever they did, you know, those mimicking different animals. Like it's a huge amount in there. And especially like nowadays, many of the drills that we see, or in movement drills like the squat drills or the different mobility squat drills, and the animal movements are like the BJJ we have because we've done like MMA, for example, and stuff like this, and we've seen the practices like they use these drills like, and they've been using them for a long time, very, very long time as well. So
yeah, actually I think most these like health practices and exercises, maybe not most, but a lot of them come actually from martial arts and physical culture, because before there wasn't really a thing like called exercising.
No.
But sports have existed for a very long time, and so have martial arts. And especially in the East, the martial artists were the original personal trainers, because no one was doing exercise, everyone was doing martial arts and something incorporated to like the martial arts, like strengthening and so on.
Yeah, and these guys had like really, I think, figured out a lot about natural, exactly about like natural movement patterns. If you know anything about like Kung Fu or Qigong or Tai Chi, and you look at their movements, it's pretty incredible, you know. And so going again back to more modern times of the movement training development, you know, the early 2000s, we started to notice like this pattern of people starting to pick from all these different, you know, training regimens together. Like this was a very clear pattern that we saw, I think.
Yeah, I think different people started to combine different things together, and I think this idea kind of originated from Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee started to like mix different martial arts together, and he became the big phenomenon and so on. But in the late 90s and early 2000s, like different people started to mix different like exercise forms together. For example, CrossFit started to become popular. And what is CrossFit? CrossFit is like mixing weightlifting, running, body weight training, and other kind of stuff together in the competition form. And I think like CrossFit probably was one of the first modern forms of, let's say, movement. It's not like movement, but it's like, it's actually quite similar. It's just results oriented and competition oriented movement.
Yeah, because for me that was like immediately like just kind of like hurts my ears, like what, CrossFit movement? But I think you need to look at it like on more like a deeper level, like the essence of it. If you think about movement training as combining all these different things, maybe I don't know. I think CrossFit actually has maybe some animal movements in it, actually, some bear walks or something that they use, but definitely as like a deeper philosophical like thing, you can think about it as a movement training.
Yeah, but otherwise, especially today, it's not like a good. No, because it has so much drug problems, and it's so like ego oriented, like because it's a competition. Yeah. It's not about health, it's not about anything natural and so on. But anyway, and I think after CrossFit this idea became popular, and I think in mid 2000s there were like several guys. I think one was like Beast Skills, Jim Bathurst. He was like a fitness guy, but he started to mix like gymnastics training, calisthenics with acrobatics and weightlifting and powerlifting. Like he was one of the first guys to like focus on one arm chin-ups, one arm handstands, but also do like rope climbing and powerlifting, like heavy back squats, front squat, and so on. And he actually, at the time, like over 10 years ago, he had like super popular blog, like he was the go-to guy at the time. And after Jim Bathurst, there were like several guys, like some were like mixing like weight training with like handstands, like acrobatic handstand training only, and so on. And all of these guys actually learned from the gymnastics coach, who was the coach Sommar at the time.
Each one of them?
No, most of them.
Yeah.
Because like he was the OG, like the gymnastics guy, because he was like actual coach, and he had the book out called like Building the Gymnastic Body, and it was like published somewhere around 2000s. I also had the book, and at the time he also had like a very popular forum with like all these guys. Like it has like, I was there, and then like the hand balancing guys were there. Eero Portal was also active on the forum. Like all the, like the, not all, but a lot of the popular like movement people were part of that forum at the time. And from that forum grew the different styles of like movement training.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting to actually realize how big of a part like gymnastics, because this is what we noticed, but I wasn't really sure, so I didn't know about like it really comes from like this kind of the start, like directly from actual gymnastic coach, this whole thing, and explains actually quite a lot. But we see so much like emphasis on the gymnastic skills on people who do movement training now. That's one of the biggest focus that they have in their training, is to get skills.
Yeah, because nowadays, if you look at movement training, the modern movement training, it's mostly based on gymnastics, acrobatics, and capoeira. Because we were also doing capoeira in our early 20s, like a long time ago. And because like capoeira really has like the movement spirit in it, because it's so joyful and fun movements, full body movements, and just like moving the body in all kinds of ways. So it kind of became like a part of the foundation for the more modern movement training.
But that it was for us, it was because we trained it, and I think because Eero Portal was big on capoeira. Of course, he was a real capoeirista. That's why. Was actually,
that was like his big like contribution to
the contribution.
Yeah,
to the
because
movement.
At the time on the forum, like they had like really good hand balancers, like super pro level. Then they had like the gymnastics coach, who was the Sommar, and then Eero Portal, who was like really good capoeirista.
That there's kind of start to form.
And then that's where it kind of grew, like the modern movement training. And actually at the time, and it's kind of good way, but like it's not complete to us, like even, and it's actually very like it has lots of negative sides and so on.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it comes down to, because in the start I mentioned like we now talk about what is movement for us. We talk about this sort of the modern, what it is now, this gymnastics, acrobatics, capoeira thing, and then the sort of the ideal of movement, which is the people. I think people who do it kind of would like it to be everything, that they have it all and they don't really need to do anything else apart from the movement training. But this is where we really kind of start to maybe find some like criticism for movement training, because we've really noticed that actually movement training does lack a lot of things, and it has a lot of good things, but it also is missing a lot of parts, and it's not this sort of ideal thing, because when we look at these people who actually train it, they never do everything. They focus on these parts of like the skills and some mobility and some movement, but there is lacking a lot.
And actually, that's the reason why we started to move away from that kind of training, because it's actually fundamentally, it's kind of dysfunctional, because the origin come from like gymnastics and so on, which is actually a sport, and it's all about the skill. It's all about the front levers, all about the planches, and all about the really high level skills. And that's actually how we see it. It's actually a big problem in the movement training scene, that it has become so much about the skill, and not just about like some basic skills, but about extreme skills.
Superhuman.
Like you have to be and it's not even and it's still like arbitrarily chosen skills. It's not like everything. Like you said, people like to believe that it is like complete and it is like everything. Like when you can do the one-arm chin-ups, when you can do one-arm handstands, and when you can do like single leg squats and so on, that you have the ultimate physique. But actually, you are still only in one bubble, in one box, and you are only good at those particular skills. You are not actually, if you step outside the box, you will realize that those skills actually were not universal. They do not actually transfer to like other physical activities as long as you step outside the box. And that's the problem in the movement training scene today. It is to believe that it is complete, it is full, and if they expand it, it's always in the same, like, I don't know how to say, maybe in the same nature,
spirit,
in the same nature and the same spirit. So of course, like, you can add infinite amount of skills, and you can add infinite amount of like that kind of stuff, but there are always like different variations of the same thing. They are not actually stepping outside the nature of the
inner nature of the training doesn't change, because like you still have this, whatever training you do, still have always the same purpose. And like we talk about in the start, that the kind of the almost like the purpose and the goal of the training is the determining or the defining factor. And these guys usually, they have always the same purpose behind it, which is to get a skill,
Yeah, even like the flexibility has become a skill, because it's always driven by the extreme flexibility, which is, by the way, not even a good thing in like as a well-rounded athlete, because it too much of something actually leads to problems as a whole. Like too much flexibility increases the chance of injury and doesn't prevent it. Plus, you don't actually even need the extreme flexibility unless you are like a ballet dancer and you must be able to lift your leg like this to like pointing north.
Any sort of sport that requires really well-rounded performance, athleticism, and movement ability, actually it doesn't require these extreme things. And like almost whatever football players or martial artists even, or whatever sport you look at, tennis players, they usually never have these abilities, almost never. because they are simply not needed usually for that well-rounded performance. They are needed for, well, if you are competing in the skills, then you need to have them, and there's nothing wrong with this. But like recommending this as the sort of ultimate form of ultimate mover or ultimate standard for a well-rounded athleticism, which it is brought up almost every single time. This, I think, is the big mistake that is done there, because it simply isn't the standard.
Yeah, and also it's people like to believe it's everything and it's complete, but everything is like chosen what the people like the most. Like even the importance of mobility and strength. Like it's very important to be flexible and mobile and strong. But how about, let's say, strength endurance and conditioning and other like physical attributes? Like why is it so that those other qualities are so important? And you have to be extreme, but then the cardiovascular ability and strength endurance and conditioning and everything else are not that important at all. Like if you need to be extreme, flexible, shouldn't you also be able to run like extreme distances?
Yeah, what is it based on that these are the most important thing?
Yeah, because there's no point actually. It's just has become like what is like the most flashy, what is the most like exciting, and so on. And
so there isn't like a actual very like good reasons behind it or good purposes, other than yes, it's flashy and it's a little bit sort of like an ego thing behind it, I think, actually, at least for what it seems like to me, because there is no real function for it truly.
Yes, because and actually it moves away from health, it moves away from posture, and it moves away from like universal performance, and that's why we have been moving away from the really ego way of like training, seeing progress in this that the skills are the measure of progress.
Yeah, this is also one of the things, like people don't understand that when you do like a form of training, it usually comes with the expense of some other form of training. So like it isn't like you usually even can't do it all, really, like simply all things. If you spend all your time like on the super extreme skill stuff, it means that you're gonna actually miss a huge amount of training, and actually training that would be incredibly beneficial for your health, for your posture, for your everyday life, and for universal strength, universal performance. And this is why, like, because the skill training or something is not really the problem in itself. It's more like the focus on always these extremes, as we're talking about here, because then you're going to miss the basic stuff. Like I explained at one point during this podcast about how good and how actually difficult and how challenging some of the basic movements are for like your average person who doesn't have training background or anything. And like these movements could be incredibly useful to these people, but yet it's easy to kind of skip them, because you think that there's this higher thing that you must reach every time, and it's like the like easier movements are always like just like stepping stones that you need to get to this sort of weird level. But that's not the case, and you're just bound to kind of miss a huge amount of benefits that we think are the most essential for it, which is the health and just learning to move and express yourself. And instead you just start to chase the extremes.
Yeah, it's exactly the same as like chasing a certain amount of weight in bench press or deadlift. It's just in a body weight format.
Oh yeah.
And actually I think even the movement training scene is actually maybe there are because there are many different sections. Like some are really all about the skills, but I think even some of them are moving away from that kind of training, and they are like doing more dance-like movements and so on.
You mean like there's a pattern of like, of course not all movement people like do it or emphasize the skills, but are
because I think people are starting to see the fact that because when it was first brought up, it was like kind of seen as like everyone can reach these skills, and that it's like there's some like secret you can learn so that everyone can, no matter who you are, can learn with enough training the one arm chin up, the one arm handstands, that there are kind of like secret methodology behind it. But now after years and years and years, actually it starts to show that not everyone has the body structure, not everyone has the DNA, like the muscle fiber type, to reach the extremes in all of these categories. So it's like, so it starts to like balance it out like natural, like because you can try it like 5 years with like really good coaching, and you are not maybe getting close to it. So you start to be like, it's not like what it was made out to be.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like you say, because there was the start, and it was sort of people watch it first and like, oh, that's where we can reach it. But now that like more time has passed, people have more experience in this training, and they actually start to right now kind of wake up and see. And again, there starts to be a little bit like new shift in the movement training as well, and what they are emphasizing. And I think even people who were like who were maybe like bringing up and emphasizing these skills, even they are probably like, I think, changing some of them their opinions at the moment. At least this is what I've seen.
Even like many teachers that used to do the extreme stuff, they are not doing them anymore, or they are doing them very little because one, they are getting older, and it's not even like a sustainable way to train. It's not a like healthy way to train those skills at that level, and plus because the people are waking up, so you have to focus on the actual thing, what actually helps people.
And there's always like this, people just need to have this sort of black and white, like if you do movement training, well, then the other training has to be bad for you to feel good because you just want to do the movement training. And like movement training, it has these amazing benefits and all, but we need to like recognize some of the limits that it has as well. Like I think, for example, if it really was so perfect, the athletes and all who do all these movement patterns and such, they would probably have much less injuries, much less faulty movement patterns, much less imbalances in their body. But we need to see that there is another side to the training that kind of is fundamental, and it's more like what we always talk about, like this sort of more precise training. Not to go too deep in this podcast about it, but there's a like movement training for us is maybe 30%, like I don't know, I'd say maybe 30% of our training, and the rest of there is all the other stuff that we also realize, like the strength and conditioning, that we know this is vital. Like MMA experience has brought us, for example, this extreme flexibility and mobility. It's like it means almost nothing in like the combat sport situation,
and in most sports as well, unless the sport demands the extreme flexibility, like let's say the ballet
dancer, or if you're a gymnastic, so
like you can be immensely strong and athletic and functional without extreme flexibility or extreme mobility or so on.
And like we have to recognize that, like when you do the movement training, you are getting a host of different things, different attributes. You're improving in your body, the coordination, the strength, your mobility or flexibility and all this, but it's not so precise way, and people it's very hard for us to change certain like learned patterns that we have without very conscious and super like focus. And movement training doesn't have this because as I explained, the goal is never as precise when we do movement training, and this is why the movement training is also good, but it's also the weakness of it. Like at the same time, always the good thing about the thing is always the sort of the weakness of it as well.
Yeah, there's no perfect workout.
Yes.
Like if you focus on conditioning or strength endurance, you have to do like the exercises at very high pace, and that immediately means you cannot do slow tempo training, or you can do it, but it's not the same. So if you want to develop mobility, you have to do it slow with control and so on. But if you want to do if you want to develop conditioning, then the speed is okay and it's a good thing. But it also eliminates the mobility aspect. So one thing, like you said,
it's hard to like articulate, but for me it's like the good thing about the thing that you are getting is also the bad thing about it. It's paradoxical, but this I don't know how
if
to
you
better-
go extreme in one area, you will lose something in something else. Like if you go extreme flexibility, like some yogis, like super extreme flexibility, you start to like become more prone to injuries. Actually, yeah.
And also, like I mentioned, like the sort of other form of training that we do, like in the Athlete to Nexus course that we have, like if that's the only thing that you do, it's easy to lose that more natural flowy movement. If you only do the sort of very hard stability training that we do a lot, which is incredibly useful, but that's the only thing that you do, and you never kind of release and let go of that control. It's not the optimal way. Like this I think is a hugely important point that we want to bring. Like there isn't a perfect workout, there isn't a perfect program or perfect system that has it all, and like you need to kind of try this or be very open and understand that these are these box, like you use the term box.
Yeah.
These are the sort of boxes, and you must understand that it is a box. When you understand that that's a sort of box, then you can, I don't know, more freely.
Yeah, and you have to like realize that you cannot define the box, because if you define it and start to focus on it, then it becomes the box actually.
Wait.
Like let's say if you say like movement training is everything, and you start doing the movement training, then it becomes the box.
Because you call it the movement training, and then it
because
sets a certain set of like rules and movements that you do inside that.
Yeah, because you gave a name to it.
Yeah.
So actually, if you want to be free, it shouldn't even have a name, or it should be like.
Or it's just in a practical form. Like I think we use it in a just practical format that it's easier to like communicate about the training. It's not that it needs to be this. It's just like, well, now we do this type of training that's easier to like tell people about what we do here as opposed to what we do here, and it's easier to like tell about the different purposes that we have on these different training styles.
And also realize that like no box is better than another. It just have different benefits, and you are free when you can like use different boxes like without like attachment. That's the thing. Like you are outside the box yourself, and you just like visit the different boxes when necessary. Right. Because what has happened in the movement scene is that the movement scene thinks that it's like limitless box, that it has everything, but it's actually a very small box.
Very, very small. If you look at how these people do it, they always have you can have your ideal of it, but you look at in practice how people do it and what they have it, very narrow, very limited, almost every single time.
And of course, like people like to focus on the skills because it's the flashy and exciting, and there's nothing wrong about the skills, but the skills should be outside the heart of training, because the heart of training should be focused on the health, posture, and performance of the body, which is actually the most realist thing about the training and about the body, what actually has the biggest impact on the quality of life and so on. And the skills are fun to pursue and fun to chase, but they shouldn't be the focus, because if they are the focus, they destroy the body. It's like focusing on money instead of like focusing on like helping people and so on. Like you're focusing on the side product or the external thing instead of actually the main thing.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good talk to actually end this, because the heart of the thing, and a very good metaphor as well about it. You know, that you have the symptoms, and then you have what is the cause, and you have the cause and the effect in a way there. Like you need to be able to separate between these and understand what is the most important thing, what is the heart of it all. All right, hope you enjoyed this and it was very illuminating for you in terms like movement training. You have a better idea of everything, the history, where it comes from and all this, because it is kind of a mess and it has so many different forms nowadays and the definitions and everything. But here we tried to make a sense of all of it. So see you guys in the next video and take care. Stay strong.